Standing today, I'm in one of the most famous battlefields in human history. This is the battlefield of Waterloo, where Napoleon Bonaparte finally came to the end of his rule and reign, and many feel like a disruption and terror of Europe. He had escaped from imprisonment 3 months earlier, and for 100 days, once again, Napoleon was ruling France. He had quickly gathered together an army of around 100,000 men, and the Allied forces against him immediately offered each of the four major powers to raise 150,000 soldiers and to put an end to Napoleon once and for all. The Duke of Wellington was already here near Waterloo with his army, and General Blücher had the Prussian army nearby as well, about 200,000 men altogether. And so Napoleon, of course, his instincts always were not to wait until the enemy invaded him. He had a fast march into Belgium, where first he attacked the Prussians and defeated them. And then he turned to Wellington, and his thought was, if I can also defeat Wellington, we can buy time to raise more soldiers and bigger armies and perhaps even negotiate some kind of truce. And so he turned on Wellington, and he was certain that the Prussians, after having been defeated, would not be able to come to his aid for some time. But Napoleon left General Grouchy about 33,000 men to keep an eye on the Prussians, while he turned his gaze on Wellington with about 69,000 men. What he didn't know was that Wellington had found a very good posture defensively, was hiding his men, many of them behind a ridge that Napoleon could not see. And so on June 18th, 1815, Napoleon launched a last opportunity, a last-ditch effort to defeat the British and hold on to his rule. It was a day-long affair. About 45,000 people were killed, but the Prussians managed to get to Waterloo. And when they came near the end of part of the day, the afternoon, that became the turning point where the French army of 33,000 men never arrived to help Napoleon. And by the end, many valiant efforts, much bloodshed was spilled, much bravery shown. The head of Napoleon's cavalry had made a vow, he'd taken an oath that he would never fight against France's enemies again. And he knew that if he was captured, it would be the death penalty for him. And so he continually led charges of the cavalry, but ultimately was captured and sentenced to death. But because he was such a heroic soldier, he was allowed the honor of calling his own firing squad. And he's the one who shouted, "Ready, aim, fire," as they shot him to death. Many interesting, fascinating stories, but Napoleon is an example of an ambition that is completely self-centered. It was all about his rule, his fame, his glory, and he was willing to see hundreds of thousands of his fellow Frenchmen die on battlefields across Europe to make him famous. And as talented as he was, every person has Waterloo. Every person gets to the end of themselves, where even their greatest bravery and brilliance is not enough to overcome all the problems that you face, especially when you do it without God. And Napoleon was his own God, and he found that his powers were not enough. And he spent the remainder of his days on the island of Helena, writing his memoirs and blaming everyone else for his shortcomings and his failures. But the battlefield of Waterloo now is next to the city of Waterloo, and a highway runs by it. And if you didn't have the roadside signs, you'd never know that some 40 or so thousand, 45,000 people were killed and wounded here in these fields that farmers use now to grow crops every year. But the world is littered with battlefields and memorials of the futility of men when they tried to live their lives apart from the guidance of God.